Welcome to the Bros of Gardening. I'm your host, Mike Westphal, joined as always with my co-host, Daniel Van Dyke. And of course, Alex is here to help keep us on track, ask us lots of great questions. Today, our topic is the best plants for fall. We're going to be talking about fall color.
Perfect timing.
It is that time of year. The weather has started to cool. You know, we start to think about the leaves changing on the trees and all the fall colors that are coming around. So how you guys been?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty excited for Halloween coming up here shortly.
Yeah. No, like I said, I'm just enjoying fall. I think I've mentioned it on every podcast this season so far as football. So I'm just enjoying the fall and everything that fall brings, especially the cooler weather and getting out in my yard and enjoying it a little bit.
Nice. Yeah.
All right.
Should be a good episode.
All right. Well, let's start it. So, Mike, in the garden center, what has been the most popular item so far this season? Anything unexpected?
I don't think anything like super unexpected. Of course, pansies and mums. I mean, we're starting to just kind of get into pansies. Here, we plant pansies. Typically, we recommend planting pansies in October. So we're just getting into like pansy season, really. And mums are actually a little bit earlier, but we're still, holding strong with mums. I think perennials have been super popular all year. So right now, we've got a great collection of ferns. Ferns are awesome in the fall because you can actually, plant them in containers. I love growing them in containers. There are a lot of native ferns that are really excellent that we've carried a lot of this year. I think hydrangeas are a big one. I'll talk about a little bit more of that. But I think in general, probably the biggest surprise is shrubs. We've had a huge crop of shrubs this year. So we've got a great selection of shrubs, whether it be azaleas or hollies or boxwoods, even to, your trees, which is like Japanese maples and some of your smaller blooming trees that you'll be able to enjoy in the fall, but also in the spring. So I think really it's just kind of been, the great collection of shrubs, whether it's deciduous or evergreen shrubs. And I think that's what people are really kind of gearing towards is, adding to their landscape and adding to their foundation plantings or redoing some foundation plantings. So I think that's kind of the big one that I've seen this fall so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much seeing the same thing. I mean, like Mike said, for us, when customers, we have some larger color changes where, it might be 1,200, 1,500. We just did the color change at the store, last week. And so we're really getting into those 6-inch annuals finally, which the 6-inch pansies are obviously the big one. So we always tell people 1st of October. So we're pretty much right there. And so we've been planting and we've been starting to get them in the ground, which is fun. And so, that's kind of the tried and true for that. But, like Mike alluded to, I think, low maintenance is becoming such a popular thing. We've talked about it so many times, but people kind of leaning in more towards perennials maybe than sometimes people who have maybe done annuals in the past. Obviously, different perennials are showy at different times. There's a few I'll mention that are nice in the fall, but just not having to replant every year obviously has its appeal. Nothing's going to beat the color you're going to get out of your pansies. And, like I said, they're gorgeous. And like I said, they're rolling in now, and then we've got a ton of them. So that's always fun. But yeah, I've definitely seen kind of an uptick in the desire for perennials and even perennials that might not be doing, showing out right now. It's still a great time to plant them. So if you can find them, you can still get them in the ground now and enjoy them next year.
Yeah. And I will point out pansies for our listeners across the United States and everywhere that you might be listening from. In our area, pansies are like the number one fall color because they'll make it through the winter. Whereas a little bit further north, they really plant pansies more in the spring and less so in the fall because they won't make it through the winter. So we're in a fortunate location where you can, grow pansies in the fall. They'll survive through the winter. Some winters they'll thrive. Some winters they might just kind of shut down a little bit, but they won't die. And then the spring they'll kind of, explode again. So, and then further down south, they might not even plant pansies because it's just always too warm for them.
Yep.
And pansies really thrive in cooler weather. So that's why we talk about it a lot because in our area, it's our number one color choice. I mean, you can plant pansies in containers and hanging baskets in the landscape, massing them out. So it is by far our favorite, fall kind of blooming plant because mums are great and offer that color that you get in fall.
Yeah.
But, typically are a little bit shorter lived, meaning the bloom time is shorter. Now, great if you can take them and plant them in your landscape and do different things because they'll come back each year in our area. But pansies are kind of our go-to when you're talking about blooming plants, and that's what annuals are all about, right?
Sure.
I mean, you plant them and they bloom the entire time frame that you've planted them, and then you swap them out for something in the spring. So pansies are kind of the one that we love to talk about so much. And violas you can throw in there. They're kind of similar, smaller blooms.
So, Daniel, in your designs, what plants do you use to create a bold fall impact?
Yeah, so I think the most obvious one for me, and if you go back on one of our previous podcasts from the spring when we did our bro versus bro for our favorite shrubs, I think me and Mike both had a version of this, is the Sasanqua camellia. So Sasanqua camellias, fall blooming camellias, they're kind of a later in the fall. I always tell people, just like a rough time, late October, and it kind of depends on obviously our, the temperament of the climate, or of the season and how it's going. But you get that late fall color, and I mean, mine usually hold their blooms up through Christmas. Right. I mean, they'll it's really a late fall, early winter. But Sasanqua camellias are one of my favorites. Dark green foliage all year, so you always have that substance. But then you get this pop of color when a lot of your perennials and things might be going dormant. So I always tell people, if you can mix that kind of stuff in, then you can have that kind of different interest throughout different parts of the year. One of my favorite trees is a little bit newer. It's called a flamethrower redbud.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, it's a really cool one. Its foliage kind of has this red, yellow, golden look to it. It has a beautiful fall foliage. That's a tree it's kind of a smaller ornamental tree. It's not going to be a massive tree. So you can kind of fit it into different places. That's one of my favorite trees for like fall interest. Azaleas, Mike mentioned, obviously our reblooming azaleas, whether it be encores or some of the other rebloomers. You usually get a pretty good healthy set in the fall as well as the spring, which is kind of the big difference from those classic azaleas. So they give you nice color. And then in perennials, some of my favorites, like fall blooming aster is a nice one. Fall blooming anemone is one of my favorites, a Japanese anemone that does the fall blooming. You can get some really cool colors and some nice blooms out of that. But probably one of my favorites, muley grass. So muley grass is the two that we use the most are pink and white. Obviously we're a little more coastal here, so we have a lot of the requests for grasses. And muley really shows out in the fall. It's really when it's doing its thing. And so I've been enjoying that for these past, they're really starting to do their thing now. So I've been enjoying it over the past couple weeks. And you can do pink, you can do white. Those are the two. Pink is probably the most popular, the one that we carry the most of. But there is a white version of it too. That we plant a lot of, and they're very whimsical. They're kind of blowing in the wind, and you just have this beautiful pop of color. When a lot of grasses are kind of done by the fall, still beautiful. The grasses do great in the fall, but muley really is very showy in the fall. Tough plant, can grow in a lot of different environments. So those would be a couple of my favorites, to kind of try to incorporate into the landscape if you are trying to get something for some fall interest.
Yeah, I mean, ornamental grasses are just absolutely amazing, and the muley grass is one of my favorite ones too. You can catch it at sun, when the sun rises or when the sun sets, when the sun is low in the sky, which in the fall is a fair amount of time, actually. Yeah, sure. Because as that sun gets lower and lower in the sky, so that's when it shines. I mean, you might see it in the garden center, and I will tell you, a muley grass in a pot is nothing compared to when it's planted in the ground. Yeah. I mean, it kind of looks a little scraggly in a pot. So I always have to say, hey, trust me, you've seen this out there. If you haven't seen it, I'll show you a picture, because there's nothing better than once it gets established in the ground and starts to put out those plumes that during the day you might see here and there, but at sunset or sunrise, it's just absolutely amazing when the light kind of shines through it from a lateral pattern.
A lot of those grasses at the one that we filmed a couple weeks ago, that's I guess that's been a couple months ago now, but there's a ton of muley grass there. So I'm excited for us to get back out there soon and film that again, now that the muley grass should really be showing out. At the time, the pennisetum were going crazy, and now the muley grass should be in full effect. So I'm excited to get back out there and see those now that we're heading into October.
For sure. So, Mike, are there any underrated fall plants that you wish more gardeners would try?
Yeah, so that question is, probably specifically designed for me, because I love some of the unusual, some of the unthought of plants out there. So I'll kind of group this as a bigger group of deciduous shrubs. So when we talk about shrubs, it's almost always, I want evergreens, I want some foundation plants, I want a screen, I need to block out a neighbor. You just don't want it to look bad in the winter. You don't want it to look dead or be defoliated. So But some of the best fall colors, I think, come from deciduous shrubs. And one of my all-time favorites is oak leaf hydrangeas. Oak leaves are amazing. They are really a 4-season plant. You think of hydrangeas, you think of summer blooms. Well, the blooms have faded by now. The fall time is coming. And the leaves are going to start changing colors, and oak leaves will get an amazing array of color. It's an easy one to grow because you can plant it in full shade. You can plant it in actually a little bit of sun. It's one of the hydrangeas that can take more sun. It can take very wet feet. It's a very tough hydrangea, really, and the fall color is absolutely amazing. I mean, you get the reds, oranges, you even sometimes get some yellow in there, some gold. It's just a great looking plant, and when the leaves fall off, it exposes this kind of exfoliating bark, especially as the shrub gets older and more mature. You start to see this kind of peeling bark pattern. So it's a really unusual one. It's one of my favorite of all the deciduous shrubs, and definitely because it's multi-seasonal and it's multifunctional. You can use it in a lot of different areas. Great massed out too. And I'll throw in ginkgo tree. Ginkgo tree is one of my all-time favorite trees. I probably haven't mentioned it on this podcast yet, which is surprising. It is my go-to tree. It is a prehistoric tree. It was here in the time of the dinosaurs. So it's been around for a really, really long time. It can live for hundreds of years, just one single tree. It's one of those super slow growing trees. So it's something that you might be planting for future generations, especially if you're trying to get, the benefits of the shade of the tree. But the best part of this tree is the fall color. So what happens in the fall with this tree is the entire tree turns this gold color. And I'm not talking yellow. It's a true gold. I mean, you think of yellow sometimes being kind of a bad color when it comes to plants because maybe the plant's struggling. It's low in nitrogen. It's got some issues, maybe some insect issues. But this is a true gold color. And then what happens is the entire tree turns gold. And then what's really cool is over a 3 to 4, maybe 5-day period, all the leaves fall off the tree. And so what happens in this transformation is the tree goes from a full golden tree above to a golden pond beneath. And so you have this bare tree with all these gold leaves. It also makes cleanup pretty easy because all the leaves fall off the tree in one fell swoop. Yeah. And so you enjoy the leaves on the ground actually because it looks really cool. Most varieties nowadays don't fruit. I know most people are going to say, well, they get this nasty smelling fruit. They're grown a lot in New York because they're a great street tree. They have a very good root system. They don't break concrete and things like that, but they fruit and then people walk and squish the fruit and it has this bad smell. Most varieties that you're going to get these days are not going to produce the fruit. They're either males or they're a variety that doesn't produce the fruit. So that's the good news. But other than that, a great tree, something that you should definitely consider. They can get big. They can get 50, 60 feet high and equally as wide. But again, that's for future generations.
We're not going to see it.
We'll probably not see it because it's going to take a long time to get there. And then I'll just throw in one other kind of curveball, weird one, a house plant. You think of course, we're talking about outdoors and fall and all of that. But indoors, you can bring some of that fall color in. And crotons are by far my favorite fall plant. I look at it for tropical inspiration because it's got a lot of those colors, but it's also a great one for fall because it's got maroons, it's got reds, yellows, oranges, and dark purples all in one leaf. You can find one leaf with all of those colors in it. So if you're looking for inspiration, just look at a croton. What are the fall colors? They're all on the croton. And then there's new varieties that have thinner leaves and curled leaves. They're just a cool plant, so you can include that into your home inside. You can take it and mix it into a container outside as long as you bring it in before the temperatures get too cold, or just treat it like an annual. But crotons are a great one just to throw another one out there. So thanks for the question. That I could go for a little bit longer if you wanted me to on all the different things that I would consider kind of fun and unusual.
Maybe a dedicated podcast to Mike's unusual plants. So Daniel, how do you make a design have fall color but still look good throughout the winter?
Yeah, so I mean, that really comes into something I alluded to a little bit earlier, which was the kind of mixing in different things. And so obviously when it comes to fall color, you can do, this is where I really do recommend the pockets of annuals. I know we kind of talked about a little bit earlier how, and even on podcasts from last spring, perennials are really hot right now. Everybody loves perennials. Obviously the downside of most perennials is they go dormant in the wintertime. We don't say they die back, but they go dormant. And so basically what you are, if you have a big pocket of these perennials, it's going to look blank during the wintertime. So that's where there is still a home for your seasonal color. That's the easiest way to kind of dress up your winter landscape. You're going to change it out again in the spring. So you're leaning into the annual aspect of it. But one of the ones I mentioned earlier, Shashanqua camellias. Obviously, once we get really bitterly cold, the blooms do stop. They do stop blooming. Like I said, I usually say around Christmas time or so. But again, what I love a lot about the camellias, they have that really, really dark green foliage. Their leaves are a little bit smaller than the classic camellias, but you still have that year-round interest. You can use it up against a foundation. Yep. When you're talking about front foundations, I try not to plant a lot of deciduous material right up against the house. So, I love that as a back layer up against a home because you do have that kind of dark green backdrop. And then things like grasses and stuff like that, even when they go dormant and they have that kind of tan brownish color to them, they're still kind of this whimsical. They'll blow in the wind. And then, that's why I always recommend, I cut grasses back, but I don't do it until, really the 1st of March almost, late February, March, because I like to have that substance there, even if it does look like it's, has gone dormant. It's still nice to have. So I think really what I would recommend is mix in different things. If you love perennials, that's great, but definitely mix in some evergreens with it, even evergreens that plant in the fall. But again, I don't even recommend going all fall stuff. It's really creating that blend to try to create kind of a year-round interest. And that's what all of our designers try to do is no matter what time of year it is, there's something you're going to be able to admire. And like Mike said, too, with some trees that defoliate, Japanese maples have a really unique branch structure that you don't even see when they're flushed out. But then when they defoliate, some of them have a nice bark color. Coral barks are like a bright red color of bark so that you can really see that stand out when it drops its leaves. But then even like the weeping ones, they have these kind of really unique branches that kind of intertwine with each other. And so that gives it some year-round interest. Red twig dogwoods are one of my favorites. Again, they have a beautiful bark color that are honestly kind of known more for their deciduous state than they are necessarily when they're leafed out. So it's just trying to mix in different things and don't go all in with one thing so that you don't have that interest throughout the year. So I would say just trying to mix it up and trying to concentrate on different bloom cycles. And again, that's where I always say the one down, and perennials are great, but mixing it in with some annuals and some evergreens, will go a long way in those winter months.
Yeah, mix them out, mix them, and then mix them in like in packs, mass them out. I mean, I see it in your videos that you're doing with Daniel and the landscape, and so I know you're seeing it out there where the mass appeal of. I mean, you hear of a brown grass or a straw colored grass, and you say, oh, that's not great, but in a mass, it looks really cool. I mean, it's what I always tell people with lawns. What is a lawn? I mean, when we talk about like the lawns that go dormant in the winter, a lawn to the eye is really all one color. Not blooming over here and crabgrass over here, and this is lime green and this is dark green. You want it all one color. So if you're St. Augustine or Zoysia or Bermuda goes all dormant and it's all that straw color, and you got dark mulch beds with all these mass plantings, it looks good because it's all one color. So massing really, really helps.
Oh yeah, it does look amazing. So lastly for you guys, if you could only plant one thing this fall, what would be and why? And Daniel, you cannot say Goshiki osmanthus.
Well, then I'm not going to answer. But no. So other than Goshiki osmanthus, no. If I had to do one thing, I've mentioned it a few times. Shashanqua camellias. They to me are, again, they were on our list of favorite shrubs overall, and not even taking out the fall aspect of it. But I love them. They're very hardy. They can take a lot of sunlight. They can take full sun, which obviously a lot of when people think of camellias, they think of the Japonica camellias. They're a little bit more shade. They prefer a little bit shade. Their blooms are huge and beautiful, but they're a little more messy, like when the petals fall. So it's just a very low maintenance shrub. They don't have a lot of disease and pest problems. Like I said, they're a dark green that really pops against, regardless of what color your house is, that dark green is going to really look nice up against it. There's a lot of different ones. I mean, one of my favorites, I think the one that I did talk about, the autumn rocket, it's kind of a narrow, tall, kind of columnar plant. So it can kind of fit the bill in different areas. It can give you height on the corners, can frame up a front entrance. I mean, you can do a lot of different things with it. There's ones they have pink, they have red, they have whites. And so that's just my personal, one of my favorite shrubs of all time, let alone my favorite fall shrub. So if I had to pick just one to really lean into this fall, your Sasanqua camellias, whether it's autumn rocket, Yuletide, shishis, whatever the case may be. There's a couple different ones, but they all have those nice character traits of hardy, dark green, and they just, like I said, they can solve a lot of different issues in landscapes for problem spots, stuff that you haven't had success growing. They're a hardy plant.
Yeah. Very good. I mean, yeah. And great in containers. I love like the autumn rocket or Yuletide in a container underplanted with pansies. It's a great choice. I'm going a bit broad and big.
Okay.
Trees. Trees are so important. I mean, they're so important to, providing oxygen and keeping things alive and for, the best part of like nature, but it also creates different environments for you to plant in. Sure. So, I mean, you see these new housing developments where there's like, a couple small trees here and there, like there's no established feel. And so I think trees are very important, and people, and I get it. Like I understand we're in an area that could get hurricanes, and so big trees can cause some big problems, but there are some smaller trees that don't get quite as big that still will cast some shade. I think shade that you can get from a tree is super important. Mm-hmm. So like there I'm talking like river birches, oaks and maples are pretty big trees. So we're talking 50, 60 feet high. But they provide a lot of shade. They'll cool down your lawns, they'll cool down your yard in the summertime frame. There's nothing more beneficial than having shade. It'll save you on your electricity bill. Okay, so maybe you don't want to go as big. So river birches only get up like 40 feet high. Zelkovas only get about 40. There's some smaller trees. Even a Yoshino cherry, which is really considered like an understory, a smaller tree. I've seen them 30 feet by 30 feet, which will cast a pretty good shadow. Mm-hmm. Allows you to plant hydrangeas rather than just planting them on the north side of your house, or to do all of these shade gardens. So I think trees are extremely important. I mentioned my favorite one, ginkgo, earlier. Yeah. Japanese maples. There are so many options when it comes to trees, and I don't want people to be afraid to plant them. Mm-hmm. And fall is the best time to plant them.
Absolutely.
Talking bigger root balls, typically, because you're planting a bigger plant, so that requires more water, more kind of attention in the spring. And the fall, it's when root systems grow. It's a great time to get a tree established. So don't be afraid to plant trees. Now's the time, and I definitely recommend it. Whether it's a fig tree or a fruit tree or a ginkgo tree, my favorite, river birch, ornamental trees, Japanese maples. There's a huge list and a huge assortment, and I think your landscape will benefit from it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Did it again, didn't I? All right. So, Mike, what do we have coming up for the next podcast? Something a little different again.
Yeah. So we're gonna go back to do something that was very, very popular for our spring season, which was bro versus bro. We're gonna go head to head in a matchup. And since we were just talking about trees, I think you've got your work cut out for you. We're gonna do trees, our top 5 trees, and Alex will make the decision after each round.
Go ahead and mark ginkgo off.
That may or may not be my number one. I've got some other tricks up my sleeve. But trees are top 5, and we'll do a head-to-head battle, and we'll do that next week.
Looking forward to it.
Sounds
It's
good.
going to be fun. All right.
Thanks, guys. Thank you all for watching and listening to our podcast. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can listen to the Bros of Gardening in the future. And we look forward to seeing you next week.